This story developing in the last 40 minutes or so, the City of Joburg again postponing the announcement and swearing in of new mayoral committee members. It's believed the ANC, the EFF and the Patriotic Alliance were due to make up the new committee. The importance of this, perhaps, is that the ANC and the EFF would be working together in what would really amount to a formal coalition for the first time. Well, now we understand that the mayor, Thapelo Amad, has postponed the swearing in for the moment. Danga Mughogho is the program manager at the Well-Governed Cities program at the South African Cities Network. Danga, good afternoon to you. It's a very interesting situation. We have a mayor from a minority party. He'll be trying to lead a mayoral committee which will include at least two parties which are much bigger. How much power do you think a mayor from a minority party can have in trying to create this committee and trying to actually lead the city?
Thanks, Stephen, for having me, and that's a very good question indeed. And this has been one of the problems that has been identified with coalition governments over the last, we've had coalition governments now at local level since 2016, which is that sometimes as a result of the jockeying in terms of who gets to be the dominant party, or rather to lead the coalition, you can get a mayor of a very small party, but those still larger parties still exist. And so clearly I suspect that there has been some delay in the announcements because some of those negotiations and some of the trading, horse trading, if you will, is happening in the background. And that kind of thing does not necessarily happen when you have a larger party that's leading a coalition. So that is in fact the drawback of having a smaller party in control of a coalition, which tends to happen and can happen, unfortunately, with our system of proportional representation.
I think many people are worried about services in Joburg, and that's probably for a couple of reasons. One is that for a large part of the week, many people in Joburg just haven't had water, they haven't had electricity, but that's not necessarily Joburg's problem. They're very worried about services, about potholes. When you have a situation like this, and residents start to worry that services are going to suffer, is there anything they can do?
Well, actually there is, and unfortunately one of the problems with the coalition instability is that the timetable that exists in the local government sphere, the annual timetable for opportunities for residents to engage with processes around service delivery, may be affected. So, for example, by the 31st of January, the council, or the mayor should have tabled before council, I'm not sure if it happened or not, the annual financial statements from the previous year ending in June of 2022, the Auditor General's report also for that year, and then also the performance report from the city for that time period. Now that is an opportunity, and where the council discusses those public documents, which are reflections on the performance in the previous year, financial year, are opportunities for the public to engage in the council and actually see what the discussions are and make submissions. The next very important thing is that the budget is supposed to be tabled by the 1st of April. And as we know, the more parties, the more cooks you have in the kitchen around a budget, there are going to be compromises and changes made based on the political priorities of the parties that form part of the coalition. So I would imagine that the budget that was already being worked on prior to this point by administration officials, and around which consultations will be taking place between now and March, may well be affected by the change in government and the new leadership. So that may delay the tabling of the budget, which should in fact be by the 1st of April. But also those consultations that should take place in the absence of, this leadership, perhaps those consultations may not be as extensive as they would have been had the leadership been stable. So the opportunities remain for communities to engage with council and engage with the oversight committees that exist within the council, such as the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, which in fact is supposed to be considering the annual report and the annual financial statements from this point on. But with the instability around politics, that makes all those things a lot more murky, and we're not quite sure if the timetable will be stuck to.
There are a couple of laws that govern all of this. There's the Municipal Systems Act. I think there's the Structures Act as well. Can anyone force an election? I mean, if it's really obvious that services are falling apart and that, rubbish isn't being collected. I mean, you could just say, literally point at any of the smaller councils in most of the rural areas. If the situation in Joburg gets to that stage, is there anything anyone can do to force an election?
Well, unfortunately not. No, the legislation does not allow for that at this current time. I know in other countries they've had things like recall provisions where residents are allowed to recall their representatives, and in the local sphere in South Africa we do have PR councillors who are nominated by parties, but also ward councillors elected directly in their wards. So unfortunately, citizens are at the mercy of the political leadership and the shenanigans that take place there. And one of the things I should say is that our research at the South African Cities Network, and most recently in the State of City Finances, which we released end of last year, says that there's a very strong correlation between stability of the municipal manager and the CFO, in other words, the length of time they are in office, and the performance of the municipality in terms of service delivery. And the reason for that is, like any organization, when you have instability at the top, you're not sure who your boss is going to be, what their priorities are. The administrators, the people who actually sit in the Joburg Metro building, for example, and do the actual work of making sure that we have electricity, that the potholes are fixed, that we have water, and that our sanitation is collected, that instability cascades down. Their managers are unsure if they're still going to be wanted by the new leadership. We still have an acting city manager, for example, which I think is a direct result of having had coalition government all this time. And so those kinds of things affect service delivery in a way that, unfortunately, we can't actually do anything about till the next election as citizens.
So if I see someone cleaning the streets or directing the traffic or fixing a pothole, and they're employed by the City of Joburg, does it matter to them? I mean, is there a direct correlation between the service they provide, whether they in fact provide the service, and whether or not the member of the mayoral committee for sanitation services or roads is empty, vacant, or has filled, or is changing once again? I mean, there's a direct link between what's happening at the top and what's happening with services.
Yes, and the reason for that is we have a system where the executive is actually a group of councillors who are delegated from the council to be part of the mayor's cabinet, if you will, and they are supposed to provide oversight of the person and the people who are actually doing the work within the administration. So the idea being that the political representatives have a mandate from the people, and they have a wish that they are there to make sure that the people's wishes are implemented. And so the point then is that the agreement made then between the mayor and the city manager, which is called the Service Delivery and Budget Implementation Plan, every single year is a set of targets and tasks that will be completed during the course of that year. So now when you don't have an MSc in a particular portfolio, the portfolio which is in the council tasked with oversight, which is called the Section 79 Committee, and that consists of councillors who are not in the executive, it can continue its work, but you do want the MMC in place to know the portfolio, to understand what's happening within the department itself, to be able to attend those oversight meetings where the hard questions are asked, such as, why was the road that you said was going to be fixed in such and such an area not fixed? Why has electricity not been delivered to this particular ward when in fact we had expected it to be delivered? So those kinds of questions and that process of oversight, which is basically asking, is what you said you were going to do, did it actually happen, tends to fall away when you don't have NMCs in place.
There are other issues around all of this. So tomorrow it will have been a week in Joburg without a mayoral committee. I'm presuming the mayoral committee essentially disbanded when the mayor, the former mayor, the DA's Mpho Phalatse, lost that confidence vote. So tomorrow it will be a week without a mayoral committee. What happens in all of those portfolios in the meantime? There must be decisions that need to be made.
Well, absolutely. The members of the administration are working towards an annual plan, the SDBIP, which I just mentioned. But the problem is, and that work continues, things like those legislated deadlines within the Municipal Finance Management Act. For example, the budget must be presented to the council, must be tabled by the mayor by the 1st of April, and it must be voted on and approved after public consultation by the 31st of June. Those are set in stone. So to the extent that there's political bickering and an inability to drive those processes forward, then that is a problem in the administration. However, the people who show up for work every day at the Johannesburg Metro building or any other metro building in any other city with a coalition government that is experiencing paralysis, they still have jobs to do, and they do that to the best of their ability every day. So in fact, it is a bit of a sad situation when we find that our political leadership, in fact, have been found wanting. And I think there definitely needs to be, and there have been calls made for some form of regularizing of coalition governments. Many parties having experienced, both the DA and the ANC, the two largest parties in the country, having experienced the instability that results when you have a small party that's a kingmaker in a coalition. I think everybody has a vested interest actually in seeing that coalitions are regulated, are seen to be much more stable, that the coalition agreements are transparent. Everybody knows what position has been given in exchange for what policy policy agreement and so on. And I think that would be the goal for us moving forward as a country, to ensure that this political instability, which can affect service delivery so badly, no longer is such an issue for residents.
Danga, Mughogho, really appreciate the time. Thank you. The Programme Manager for the Well-Governed Cities Programme at the South African Cities Network. Still, at this stage, no announcements on when we will actually find out who will be in the mayoral committee in Joburg and which parties among the ANC, the EFF and presumably the Patriotic Alliance and one other, what mayoral committee positions they will be getting. Well,